So I was an instrument of justice. That was what I believed when I entered the police academy in New York City right after college. And after 5 years of serving the fine people of Harlem, I was really more of a vessel of cynicism and exhaustion. And so I realized it was in the best interest for everybody that I probably move on to the private sector. My family was thrilled. I had weekends off. I got to have dinner, not in a car. That was exciting. And I learned I was amazed by the treasures that many of you probably take for granted in your day-to-day life. For example, I had voicemail. I had business cards. And I had toilet paper in the men's room. Yeah. And so I floated around the public sector and eventually landed in D.C., and after a while in D.C., I'd returned hundreds of voicemails, and I'd given out thousands of business cards, and I'd been like skid mark free for at least a year. But something was missing, right? I realized that I wanted more. There was a calling that I was sort of yearning to reach, and then I found out that MPD, or the D.C. Police Department, has a reserve corps, and the reserve corps allows you to be a police officer without any money. You get the uniform, you get the badge, you get a gun, you just don't get paid. And I realized, also I'll have brochures after the show if anyone's interested, but I realized that, that this was perfect, right? Because it allowed me to get back into what I really liked, but it also allowed me to not become a horrible person because I only had to do it 1 or 2 days a week, right? So for the last 3.5 years, I've been a reserve officer with DC. I work across the river in the 7th District in Anacostia, indeed, and where I work with some of the greatest cops I've ever worked with. Very busy, a lot of great people out there, and important for me, not a lot of white people. Now, I know you're thinking, but you're white, and it's true, but I just don't like white people. And I should say, right, so I should say, everyone knows of white privilege, because white privilege is a thing that's real, okay. But more terrible than white privilege is drunk white privilege. And cops deal with drunk white privilege a lot. And you may be asking, but Graham, what is drunk white privilege? Example, drunk white privilege is if you are 24 and you work for Deloitte and you have a clearance and you are standing on Connecticut Avenue, pissed drunk, and a very handsome ginger police officer tells you, "Sir, can you just get on the sidewalk?" And you say, "Make me, motherfucker." Drunk white privilege. So I stay usually on my side of the river. But, I've learned I'm not a police officer for some of the district. I'm a police officer for all of the district. And so every once in a while I go across the river to see how the other half lives, and so eat decent food and see girls in sundresses. And so I was about a year ago. I was working in DuPont Circle for a club zone. Me and a bunch of cops were working there. Basically, it's a shit show where everyone drinks a lot and pours out of bars, and they fight and they scream over Ubers. And so I was doing that. Someone has to do the dirty work, people. So I was there. And it's fine, just getting used to it, hanging out with cops, we're chatting, it's all going well. And I see this woman in distress, she's crying. So I'm like, oh, this is it, right? This is my chance. Maybe I'm being redeemed, right? An instrument of justice, right? So she comes up to me, and I'm like, hey, are you okay, miss? And she's like, right? She's super drunk. And so I glean from her, because I speak a little bit of drunk, that she was their boyfriend. They got in a fight at the club, and then she left, and she wants to go back because she misses him. And then all of a sudden, she shoves a phone in my hand, and I'm like, hello? And all I hear is like, right? It's like, and it's the boyfriend, he's in the club. And I'm like, hey, can your girlfriend come back? And she's sad or something, and she misses you. Yes, okay, right. So I hang up the phone, and I'm like, your boyfriend says you can go back to the club. And she's like, did he say he loves me? I'm like, well, we didn't get that far. So I'm like, all right, so you can go back to the club. And the club is a place called Heist, which is like around the corner from Shake Shack on Jefferson. If any of you, don't go there, it's terrible. So she's like, will you will you go with me? And I was like, yeah, sure. And she's like, and then she grabs my hand, right? And now we're off, right? She's dragging me to the club. And meanwhile, you know, the cops before, I should say, have been nothing to help me because that's what a good cop does is like laugh and point when one of your brothers is. But now it looks like I'm going somewhere, so some guy comes with me. So that's fine. So we're going, and as we're being dragged to the club, I hear there's a bunch of people waiting in line at the club, and I hear this one girl say, "There's that crazy white bitch." And I was like, all right, that's what we call a clue, in case you're wondering. So I'm like, all right. So she's like, "There's my boyfriend, there he is." And then she's like, "I'm sorry." And I'm like, "What are you sorry for?" And the dude I see his back is to me, and so he turns around, and his face is covered in blood, right? And he's like, "You hit me in the head with a fucking phone." And she's like, "I didn't mean to hit in the head with a phone." I'm like, "Wait, what the fuck is happening here?" Right? So now we go, we switch moves, right? So before she was holding my hand, and now I'm holding her hand. And so I'm putting handcuffs on her, right? And pro tip, I learned this. If the woman is wearing a purse and you're handcuffing her, remove the purse before handcuffing her, otherwise it gets trapped, like one of those ring things, you know, like you can't. So I learned that. It's a good. So as I'm putting cuffs on her, right, as I'm literally putting cuffs on her, this dude, and I shit you not, like boat shoes and Vineyard Vine pants, like comes up, he's like appears, right, like poof, like the white ghost, like appears, right, and he's like, "Excuse me, officer." I'm like, "Yes," and he's like, "I'm a pre-law at GW. Is there anything I need to know about this?" And I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me? You're pre-law. You took an elective. Like, what the fuck is the matter with you?" I'm like, "Get the fuck out of here!" And he like, you know, stumbles his ass drunkenly down. So I'm like, right? It's like, oh, white people. So anyway, so then, as if the cherry on the cake, right? So then I'm like, all right, you're under arrest. And she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." I'm like, okay. And she's like, "Am I going to have to be in a cell with black people?" And I was like, yes. I'm like, well, you know, so this is Chocolate City, even though it has been rapidly gentrifying, and the real estate market is very high priced for working class people, there is still a very good chance that you are going to be in a cell with an African-American woman. She starts sobbing, and I'm like, ugh, right? So we put her in the transport, and she goes to the police station, and I have to go back to do paperwork because that is the lifeblood of any good urban police department, is paperwork. And so I'm back up there, and I'm thinking to myself, like, this crazy bitch, she dragged me to her arrest, right? Like, she could have gotten an Uber. Like, after braining her boyfriend, she could have just disappeared, right? I know the Metro's not really reliable, but she could have waited for a while and then got on a Metro. She could have gone anywhere, but she was responsible for this, right? And as I'm doing all this, this police officer comes out from behind the cells, and she's like, "Is that prisoner yours?" And I'm like, "Yes." And she hands me this plastic bag in a way that you can tell nothing's good, right? Because it's like one of these, right? I'm like, "Uh-huh." I'm like, "Is it drugs?" And she's like, "Nah, she pissed herself." I'm like, "Oh." And he's like, "And that bitch got fake hair." I'm like, so I'm doing paperwork to voucher a urine-soaked thong and hair extensions. And I'm thinking to myself that if I was an instrument of justice, I would definitely be a kazoo. Thank you very much.
You played yourself. Yo, you played yourself.